to the Badlands.
Hello, and indeed, welcome to the first ever episode of the Badlands Sci-Fi And Dystopian Shorts podcast. And each week I'll be bringing you sci-fi and dystopian short stories. Some weeks, shorter stories, but more in one episode, and other weeks, longer stories with just one per episode. If you have a short story that you'd like to hear included on the podcast, please send it to thebadlandsshorts@gmail.com. I'll do my best to go through all emails and will get back to you if the story is going to be featured on the show. You should be able to find the show on most socials, and please interact if you see me out there. In the meantime, let's get back to today's episode, which is Sleight by Philip Leterrier. Sleight is part of a larger work called the Custodian Volumes, but stands very well on its own. Let me know what you think, and please rate the podcast if your platform allows you to do that. Here is your trigger warning for spicy language. Maybe don't listen with kids around. Chapter 1. The first distant thunder rumbles of what was to come arrived in the months following the global famine of '94. Most of the world was left without adequate sustenance, and whilst people cut up and boiled leather furniture, consumed family pets and roadkill, countless millions more simply starved to death. 6 months into the slowly unfolding catastrophe, Ben Leonard was summoned to the United Command Building for a rare in-person audience with a lead state custodian, Armel Cantor. To call it an audience was misleading, as these communions with staffers were only ever held in one specific room and were conducted via a small white intercom box, presumably connected to Cantor's penthouse office, hundreds of stories up. Men of Leonard's stature were rarely granted access to the building, let alone to actually see the custodians up close. Instead, they were ushered into a tiny room and bestowed with orders to be promptly executed. Leonard had received a surprise promotion a few weeks earlier, elevating his status at the medical board to lead logistics manager, a job which was every bit as dull as its title suggested. The main advantage was that it opened an array of packaged benefits for Leonard and his family, including enhanced food ration quota, but almost as important for Leonard was access to the fertility upgrade services. With the birth rate halving in the previous 10 years, this access, whilst not a guarantee of success, was certainly a better option than anything else that was currently available. Leonard's wife Arla had never been pregnant. They finally gave up trying 5 years previously. Until this point, using one of the state's fertility upgrade centres had been a distant dream reserved solely for the elite. He assumed that the famine was being taken care of and things would get back to normal soon enough. For him and Arla, at least. Leonard entered the lobby of the UC building, and a retinal scanner automatically tracked him and processed his access, guiding him towards a specific thoroughfare via means of dimly lit pointers that appeared on the floor beneath his feet. He made his way down the thoroughfare and was directed to the familiar-looking room where the intercom console lay. Another retina scan, and he was granted access to the room, where he took a seat at the console. He leaned forward and ran his index finger over the comm symbol on the intercom, which illuminated slightly at his touch. Almost immediately, a voice sprang through the small speaker, as if the person had been hovering expectantly over the console at the other end.
"It's Cantor, Leonard,"
emanated the intercom. Leonard recognised the voice from the hundreds of voice packets he'd received over the years. Where did this guy find the time to talk so much? "Good morning, Cantor. Good to hear you," said Leonard, looking around him and suddenly feeling faintly ridiculous.
"Likewise. Now,"
continued Cantor without dropping a beat,
"the ongoing issues regarding the famine means we're going to have to make some adjustments to the supplement program to counter some of the legacy disease pockets that have been appearing recently,"
he continued. "Okay, seems sensible. What is to be my role in the execution of this?" asked Leonard.
"I want you to personally oversee the integration of the new compound that should effectively snuff out this strain of pathogens. It's called Rapidemy. Quite the work of art,"
replied Cantor.
"It's going global within the quarter. It's important that this augment remains confidential, as we don't have time to field barrages of questions from review bodies. Our very state is hanging in the balance as we speak, and we cannot afford any further delay,"
he continued. Understood, confirmed Leonard steadfastly, but feeling a creeping unease in his stomach at the idea of concealing his work from the review bodies.
I'll make arrangements for the compound to be delivered to the Disc Center within 24 hours.
Okay, I'll see to it as soon as the shipment arrives, said Leonard, leaning forward to the console. Nothing came back through the speaker. Again, nice to make your acquaintance, Mr. Cantor. I'll keep you informed of progress via voice packets. The silence from the intercom continued. Okay, mused Leonard, more to himself than anyone else, looking around. He rose from the seat and turned towards the door, mulling over the brief but oddly unsettling discussion he'd just been party to. The supplement program was often tweaked for one reason or another, and normally without any complaint from the review bodies. So why bypass them on this occasion? Leonard used a non-verbal prompt to raise a video call to Arla as he walked out of the UC building and ambled up towards the transport lanes to find a taxi pod.
How was it?
Asked Arla when the call connected, the feed displaying on Leonard's AR glasses as he walked across the smooth asphalt. Fine, it's a confidential one but nothing particularly interesting, he replied, looking up at the cloudless sky, interrupted only by endless giant monolithic habitations and business towers. I'll be home in about 20 minutes, but I'll have to carry on working until later this evening, he continued.
Sure, by the way, the new rations have arrived. They're fancy. Well, they look fancy. I don't know what they're going to taste like,
She said, holding up some attractively labelled vacuum pack. Her face dropped slightly as she studied the packs, but she returned a smile as Leonard said his goodbyes and prompted the call to end. A taxi pod appeared and the slide doors hissed apart as he approached. He entered and slumped onto the bench, craning his neck so the retina scanner could find him and register the fare. Taxis would normally search retinal database records for the most frequent destinations for each person and automatically head off unless prompted otherwise. Leonard noted his home address appearing on the small comm screen of the taxi pod, with a sat-map route pinned out. As the taxi pod slipped through the city airways, Leonard saw smoke belching from the new bot-built incinerators. The huge facility had been fabricated within a month to cater for the increasing numbers of bodies generated by the famine. Construction bots had swarmed the site like 1,000 frantic ants, welding, pouring concrete and installing industrial crematoria, day and night, until it was cranked into operation just 22 days after the first bot had broken ground. The taxi pod efficiently filtered the air, removing what Leonard could only assume was the torpid stench of burning flesh. That smell was second in repugnance only to the sweet, rank, permeating odour of the body piles accumulating on many street corners. Service bots retrieved the dead from houses and apartments and formed rather undignified mounds of corpses ready to be transported to the new crems. Leonard shuddered at the thought and switched his thoughts to those of getting home and seeing Arla. She had been excited to learn of the new fertility access, and they decided to plan their first consultation for the earliest available opportunity. Chapter 2. The taxi pod neared the house where he and Arla lived and started to slow, the fare debit appearing on his AR display as he shuffled towards the cab door. It was one of the more pleasant sealed neighbourhoods in the city, a feature he'd been more than grateful for when the mass food riots had begun. Many open suburbs had been ransacked by the starving, and their residents beaten or murdered by those driven desperate and vengeful by hunger. Leonard hopped from the cab onto the curbside next to his driveway, straightening his clothes as the cab's doors quietly hissed shut. Slowly but gathering pace, it began to hover away and up into the traffic channel. Arla was stretching in front of a yoga tutorial, displayed in 3D by the compact light box.
Hey,
She said, without breaking away from her pose or looking around. Hi, I'll be in the workspace for a bit, he replied, walking through the hall behind her into the modestly sized office as she changed her pose in unison with the tutorial. Leonard sealed the door behind him and sat in the chair, flipping his AR display to full room. He switched the glass to opaque and reduced luminosity to reduce the stress on his eyes from the information filtering into his comm display. On the display, the following message. Repedamine supplements augment 32.543.21. Disc Center arrival 19 hours 31 minutes. Antipath adjust. Upscale to all district med hubs. He checked the availability of transport drones and shuttles for the next weeks and rerouted some of the more redundant routines to help cater for the rollout. He imagined most of this could have been organised by bots these days, but the custodians still seemed insistent on human touch where Supplemed was concerned.
When are we going to see about the baby stuff?
Arla asked as they lay in bed that night. Let me get this job out of the way first and we'll book it in. Maybe next week? He replied, tentatively.
Sure, but let's not wait too long. I'm feeling older by the day.
She continued, pouring at the skin on her face. He smiled. Nonsense, you're still sprightly and youthful.
It sure won't last forever.
She sighed, staring at the ceiling in the dark. Chapter 3. Leonard walked along the gangway across the Dist Centre shop floor towards his office, nodding at his co-workers as he passed. He was often inwardly impressed with his workspace, impressed by the efficiency and the power. How the intricate network of coalition and distribution meant that these life-saving medications would reach the entire population of the state in a matter of days, even hours. Today, however, he was distracted and edgy, pondering the delivery of the augment and how he was going to smoothly integrate and deliver the new supplements. As he sunk into his chair, he pulled up an inventory of the existing med flasks and their contents. These flasks were added to a large integrator array, which mixed and dosed the compounds ready for insertion into driver units, which were in turn distributed to regional med centres. The old drivers were removed from the administration bots and returned to the Dist Centre for reconditioning, and then refilled and sent back out. Leonard wondered how useful these meds would be in conjunction with the ongoing famine. There's not much use in being pathogen-free if you're starving to death, right? That was somebody else's department, he thought, as he paged through the progress reports of the driver refurbishment. After a joyless lunch of ambiguous seasoned protein and fat from his ration pack, Leonard walked from his office to see the cargo shuttle descend gently into the loading bay of the shop floor. He walked down the steel staircase to the ground floor, making his way through the spacious aisles where people and bots continued their monotonous duties, packing, aligning and cleaning. He reached the shuttle as one of his staff scanned codes and readied the shuttle for return, as others unloaded the large pallets of flasks. The repedamine? He asked the foreman, raising his eyebrows slightly.
Sure as 6 pallets, 1,200 flasks in total,
replied the foreman, without looking up from his small handheld tablet. Finally, he used the tablet to complete the delivery by holding it up to a small iris on the side of the shuttle. The shuttle's rudimentary brain confirmed the order with a ping and began to close its cargo hatch, accompanied by a soft, insipid male voice announcement to warn anyone around to stay clear. Can you get these to integration and begin things rolling? Leonard asked the foreman, pointing at the pallets as he began to walk back across the shop floor.
Will do,
said the foreman, making brief eye contact with Leonard before walking away towards the pallets and gesturing towards his subordinates. Later that afternoon, as he was attempting to book an appointment for Arla at the fertility centre, he received a voice packet from David, the foreman.
Ben, it's David. This new compound is returning an error on the integrator. I'm not sure what the problem is, but the machines are refusing to ingest.
The packet clicked off and Leonard prompted to start a new packet. Send me the error code and I'll get back to UC and see if it can be fixed with a patch, he replied, and prompted to send the packet back to David. Seconds later, the error code appeared in his AR feed and he studied it. rep/augment 32.543.21 FI++ carousel/FD ? It meant nothing to Leonard, so he prepared a voice packet and attached the error code ready to send to UC. It was unusual to receive error messages from the integrators, and he assumed that perhaps it didn't recognise the new compound. A few minutes later, a voice packet arrived from UC with an attachment. It wasn't Cantor, but a subordinate probably charged with sorting such glitches.
Thanks for the error information, Leonard. We've prepared a patch, so go ahead and recode the integrators and report back,
came the perfunctory communication. Leonard swiped the patch and sent straight to David with instructions.
Okay, got it. I'm updating the code, but I gotta say, this is a weird-looking patch. I don't recognise half of the characters,
replied David. Leonard swiped the patch up and looked closer. Sure enough, in amongst the regular code there were odd pictorial characters. Must be updated language. Obviously they don't value us enough to actually tell us what's going on, sniffed Leonard, returning the packet.
Sure, anyway, it's in. I'll reboot and see what happens,
replied David. A few minutes later, another voice packet arrived for Leonard.
Okay, that's got it. It seems happy enough now. Shall I run it?
Hummed David's voice flatly. Sure, let me know if there are any other issues. I'm heading out in a while, Leonard replied.
Will do.
Came the reply as Leonard got to his feet and prompted the lights in his office to switch off.
Mr. Leonard, we can offer you a consultation with your wife on Thursday at either 1400 or 1600. It will last roughly 30 minutes and we can outline what we can offer here and a rough time frame for any planned outcome.
Leonard noted that the packet address was from the Heights Fertility Centre that he'd been attempting to book with earlier in the day. He sent a packet back confirming a 1600 appointment, and then one to Arla with the same information. Progress. As he passed by the mass housing structures, he saw yet more piles of bodies, and bots dutifully loading them onto transport sledges to be taken to the Krems. The streets were sparsely populated, and many of the shops and establishments on the lower levels were either dark or burnt out. A few groups of shabbily clad people huddled together or shambled down the street. How had we come to this, with all of our progress? Why couldn't we even feed people now? Why had he even walked out here? It was depressing, and seeing the ragged bunches of people filled him with guilt. Why hadn't he prompted a cab? He did so, and within minutes he was sat in the pod as it wound upwards to join the rest of the traffic. Leonard slumped back into the chair and prompted up the code patch he'd received earlier in the day. What was going on? Questions weren't invited in regards to this sort of thing. But still, he had many questions scratching away periodically at the back of his brain. At home, he gathered Arla to him and kissed her forehead.
Good news about the clinic.
She said, drawing back and smiling at him. Yeah, he said with a half smile, looking over her shoulder. It was easier than I thought, he continued, trying to concentrate on her.
I've made some sour rice with the new packs. You want some?
She asked, walking back into the kitchenette. Is it real or synth, he asked.
Of course it's synth.
She laughed.
You got a promotion, not a lottery win. It's not bad, though.
Okay, well, I guess it's food at least, he said, thinking of the piles of grey bodies sliding onto the transport sledges. Chapter 4. The unease continued to gnaw away inside Leonard's mind, and after he'd settled into his work the next day at the DIST centre, he sent a voice packet to David, who was beginning to integrate the new compound into the supplement batch. David, can you bring me a sample of the rapidamine? I'm in my office, he asked. Something didn't add up for Leonard. The error message, the weird new patching, the avoidance of review, and the creeping feeling that he was aiding and abetting something nefarious would not leave him alone.
Chill, Ben. Any reason?
Replied David. No, not really. I've just got a few boxes to tick, responded Leonard evasively. With a small glass vial secreted into his jacket pocket, Leonard made his way out to the transport plaza and prompted a cab. As he waited for it to appear, he opened a call to his old friend Chul. Hey Chul, how are you? It's Ben, he started. He mostly communicated by packets these days, but calls were logged in a lot fewer locations than a packet that bounced through numerous server farms before it got to its recipient. What he had in mind for Chul wasn't illegal, strictly. The less attention it received, the better, though, he thought as he glanced subtly over his shoulder.
Ben, it's been a time. You've been eating?
Chul asked. Yes, I've been taken care of, unlike a lot of people I see. It's pretty grim out there, Leonard responded.
Yeah, it's got pretty rough down here, but most people who can't eat are too weak to fight now, so it's gotten quiet.
Chul went on. You still down in that concrete box in Neojung? Asked Leonard, noticing a cab descending towards him, gently flashing the yellow hazard lights to warn of its impending arrival.
Safest place to be right now. I've still got my lab and the hydro plant keeps the lights on.
He answered. Good, listen, I need to come over. I've got something for you to look at, continued Leonard.
Sounds exciting,
said Chul.
I'm here until 6 today if you can get here.
I'm getting a cab now, Leonard said, standing back as the door hissed open in front of him.
Good luck. There are sat bots for some of these districts. Too many pirates knocking cabs out of the air,
warned Chul.
Shout me when you get here. Good to hear your voice, Ben.
The call terminated as Leonard stepped into the cab and prompted Chul's address before the cab could try to take him homeward. The cab responded with restricted destination, to which Leonard followed up with, get me as close as you can. The taxi didn't respond but rose to join the traffic. Leonard assumed he'd get somewhere close. As Leonard watched the neighbourhoods and districts gradually becoming more grim and desolate as he flew, he remembered his father telling him of a time when people used to navigate taxis themselves. Some of them even had their own vehicles. It seemed madness to him that people would risk trying to get around by themselves. His grandfather had even told him of a time when people navigated wheeled vehicles along the ground, no botnavs at all. The taxi descended onto a drizzly street, only partially lit with a few remaining LEC lamps that hadn't been destroyed or cannibalised by the local residents. New Seoul had once been a bustling and prosperous district set up by a wave of rich refugees that fled South Korea in the wake of the North-South nuclear war that left the North a blackened plate of glass and the South even more irradiated as the days went by. In recent years, it had succumbed to economic sanctions and infighting. The famine was the last of many straws, and it was now a dangerous place to be unless you knew the right people. Chul was the right people. The winter evening closed in and the cold drizzle ran from Leonard's hydro-retardant clothing and bounced off his shoes as he walked purposefully towards Chul's corner of the district. "Looking well fed, salary man," shouted one of a group of grimy-looking men leaning up against a battered info panel, displaying cheap consumer goods that nobody had any interest in. The thick Korean accent didn't do much to mask the hostility, and Leonard thumbed the charge stick in his pocket nervously. Keeping a glancing side-eye on the group, he headed down an even more dimly lit road towards Jung's fortified residence. As he progressed down the litter-strewn road, he flipped his glasses to night vision and also popped up a rear-view thumbnail to keep an eye on his rear flank. He noticed with a sickening realisation that the group had left their vantage point by the partially illuminated info panel to follow him towards Chul's. There was nothing to rob these days, as all personal equipment was either implanted or biometrically controlled, making theft of anything useless aside from a scant amount of pawnable metals. The number one aim of this sort of pursuit nowadays was kidnap and ransom, although these guys looked so shabby and thin that they might break into two during any altercation. Leonard prompted a call to Chul. "I'm incoming, perhaps with some unwanted guests," said Leonard, keeping an eye on the rear view, noticing that the group were gaining ground.
Sure, I'll start unlocking. It could take me a few minutes,
Replied Chul, and then terminated the call. "Long way from home, salary man," shouted one of the group. Was it the same guy? "Maybe you want to stay a bit longer," said another in a lumpy Korean inflection as he started scuttling directly towards Leonard. Two of the other men produced what looked like short lengths of pipe from their baggy cargo trousers. Leonard fought down the panic in his belly and withdrew the charge stick, holding his thumb on the priming toggle so it could link to his biometry. It hissed and then emitted a twin-tone hum as it charged, glowing a pale yellow at the business end. Leonard knew attempting to engage this group was pointless, so with charge stick in hand he began to trot more purposefully towards Chul's, which felt like it was retreating away from him. As he reached the perimeter of Chul's concrete fortress, the assailant, who'd been making his way directly for Leonard, finally got within striking distance and produced an improvised stabbing weapon made out of what looked like hardened plastic. He lunged clumsily for Leonard and missed, at which point Leonard reached back across the man and pressed the charge stick firmly to his neck. There was a loud percussive snap. The man became totally rigid and fell to the floor like a plank. With this, the others broke into a run, directly for Leonard, not even bothering to check on their friend who still lay on the ground, stiff as a log. Leonard himself then took his turn to start running frantically, seeing two men brandishing pipes closing in on him. Just as he was expecting to feel the heavy thud of pipes on his soft cranium, he heard two loud, short pops, and the two men immediately sank to the ground in Leonard's rear-view projection. He looked forward to see Chul standing next to his large concrete front door, lowering a large charge gun. The darts fizzed and popped in the assailant's chest as they contorted silently. The final assailant judged the scene and glared blankly at Chul.
Bye,
Chul said, waving mockingly as the last guy turned his back and shuffled off.
Come on, man, that's enough excitement for you for tonight.
Yeah, said Leonard, slipping the compact charge stick back in his coat and looking over his shoulder warily. Leonard held a small glass vial up to the light and looked at Chul. It's called rapidamine, the latest augment for the supplements cocktail, said Leonard.
And?
Asked Chul, failing to see any dots, let alone join them.
They've been tweaking that stuff since before we were born. Why is it news?
I don't know, something feels off, said Leonard, before handing the vial to Chul.
Oh, off. Why didn't you say?
Mocked Chul, taking the vial from Leonard. It wouldn't ingest into the integrators, said Leonard.
So they sent a patch, right?
Asked Chul, looking at the vial. Yeah, but then it got weirder. The patch contained characters I've never seen before. Sort of pictographic, almost like a hieroglyph. But hey, it's fixed the issue, he puzzled. In addition to that, I was asked to keep the new augment quiet as they want it rolled out quick, without review, he continued. Chul raised his eyebrows, looking more closely at the vial.
Sounds kind of spooky.
He went on with a smirk.
Let's see what's in it.
Chul poured Leonard some soju and a real glass and handed it to him before sitting down at his centrifuge console. Leonard had once tasted real soju, made from real plants. It was nectar. Nobody had made it from real plants for decades. This was tweaked chemicals arranged like a photocopy of the real thing. It was passable, but more like drinking a memory of something rather than experiencing the real thing. He sipped it as he watched the centrifuge hum into life and started separating the constituents of what lay in the vial. The glow of the screen reflected in Chul's old-style glass spectacles as he waited for the ingredients list to collate on the screen. All of a sudden, there was a frantic staccato alarm tone and Chul looked straight at Leonard.
Ben, what the fuck?
He asked incredulously, looking back at the screen.
Can't be.
He started stabbing keys and rechecking data, squinting at the words on the screen. The type was in Neo-Korean, so Leonard had no idea what he was looking at.
I'm not sure why, but this vial contains a modified form of polonium-210.
Stammered Chul, continuing to look at the figures on the screen.
It gets weirder.
He continued, without looking away from the screen.
It's got a reproductive sterilizing agent like they were using for livestock, both male and female.
He turned to Leonard, screwing up his face incredulously and dragging his glasses from his nose.
They're adding this to the supplement shipment, Ben.
He asked, looking directly at Leonard. Leonard's head swam as he tried to make sense of what he'd just heard. It's supposed to be tackling some old bugs that have reappeared, uttered Leonard, almost on autopilot.
Let me calculate this,
said Chul, whispering,
What the fuck?
under his breath as he jabbed the keys urgently.
The polonium was modified with a sticky, perishable lead-derived coating on each molecule.
He pointed to the screen.
By the looks of this, given the current dosing protocols,
he stopped to jab a few more keys.
Everyone will be sterile. Forever. Almost immediately.
Leonard retched and breathed in heavily, tears in his eyes. I made this happen. I loaded the damn machines, he thought to himself.
That's not even the bad news,
said Chul, looking straight at Leonard.
If I've got this right, and I hope to God I don't, almost everyone who receives the supplement will die of leukemia or neuroplastic anemia within 3 to 4 years.
They sat in stunned silence for a moment. No more people, sputtered Leonard, looking at the nonsensical type on the screen.
No more people,
echoed Chul, reaching for the bottle of soju.
Who's getting this new dose?
Asked Chul, taking a large swig from the bottle, wincing as he chugged down the acrid liquid. I haven't really thought about that, but everyone, I think, said Leonard, trying to comprehend what he was just learning. Chul continued to look at the molecular model revolving on his screen.
This is evil. Somebody's designed this isotope. The lead coating dissolves slowly as it's stuck into muscle fibers. Regular polonium would just kill you in weeks. This drags it out.
He tailed off. But why though, Chul? Why would the custodians want to kill everyone? Asked Leonard, now pacing up and down.
I have no idea, but you have to stop this now,
said Chul, getting up from his chair. How? The integration will be done by now. The cargo shuttles will be arriving soon. It's all automated from here on out, shouted Leonard, reeling from the snowballing consequences. Arla. I have to call Arla, he thought. As this thought darted across his mind, a sharp alert tone emitted from the console in the main room. Chul ran through and scanned the small comm screen.
You're expecting anyone?
He asked, looking urgently at Leonard. No. You? He replied.
Absolutely not. Especially not 4 Hoverlanders. They're...
Before Chul could finish his sentence, a huge percussive thump shook the room and lumps of concrete showered in from the ceiling. Both men held their hands uselessly above their heads as another thump hit the house and fire spewed in through a rent in the ceiling.
Come on!
Screamed Chul and dragged Leonard by the arm back to the lab. He struck a wall-mounted push button as they ran past, which closed a pressure door behind them.
We have a maximum of 4 minutes before they're in here. I have to gather some stuff. You smash the console just in case and get ready to leave,
shouted Chul as another dull thump shook the house, causing dust to fall from the lab ceiling. Leave to where? screamed Leonard in panic. Chul stamped on a pressure plate, and an old solid metal pre-war hatch opened out of the floor in the corner of the lab. Chul gestured urgently with his eyes and then ran off to collect the essentials. Leonard set about pulling over the delicate console and stamping on the exposed wetware until it was mush. The lights flickered and died, and Chul appeared with a head torch on.
These should help us,
He said, holding up 2 hydro cells and putting one of them in his backpack. Holding the remaining cell, he fiddled with the limited buttons on the side and carefully stabbed a plate on the underside with a screwdriver. The key panel immediately turned flashing red. He tossed it back into the room and said,
We should go.
pushing Leonard towards the hatch. Leonard was first into the stinking chute, with Chul following closely behind. He sealed the hatch and gestured Leonard to
Go, go, go!
"What did you do?" asked Leonard, squinting in the torchlight, trying to find his way forward in the now transverse tunnel.
I set the hydrocell to go critical. It will discharge in about a minute from now. If we're still here, it won't be good.
He trailed off, shoving Leonard onwards. For what seemed like an eternity, they stumbled and jostled down the dank tunnel until they reached the T-junction. Chul grabbed Leonard and pushed him down the left tunnel.
Keep going.
Chul was cut short by a massive tremor and a huge rumbling bang that seemed never-ending. From behind them, they could see the previous tunnel being rapidly illuminated by the light of white-hot flames.
Run!
Screamed Chul, masonry and dust showering down all around them as they scrambled ahead. They were both aware of a growing, roaring sound catching them up from behind. Leonard came to a dimly lit opening and teetered on the edge.
Jump!
Screamed Chul, pushing at Leonard's back, and the pair fell into the stinking water 20 feet below, as the large plume of flame erupted from the tunnel above them. Chul and Leonard surfaced, choking and heaving for breath with their heads just above water.
We need to move.
Said Chul, swimming towards a thoroughfare bolted to the brick tunnel on the far side of the drain canal. "What is this place?" coughed Leonard as he heaved himself out onto the filthy steel walkway.
Legacy sewers from before the war.
Said Chul, checking through his backpack. This larger tunnel was dimly illuminated from somewhere up ahead, and the 2 men got to their feet to make their way. Chul slapping his head torch until it relit. "Who were they, back at the lab?" asked Leonard.
I don't know,
Replied Chul.
but they weren't there for me. I'm pretty sure it has something to do with what we just discovered. That's not the sort of news the custodians will want to share.
"The fuck are we going to do?" asked Leonard, hoping for some sort of sense in this rapidly multiplying chaos.
I don't know, but the first thing we need to do is ditch your glasses and dig the Neuralink chips out of our necks. They're as good as tracking devices.
Continued Chul. "And how are we going to do that?" asked Leonard, disbelievingly. Chul picked out a small zip-up case from his backpack and checked the contents. Without showing Leonard the contents, he continued.
We need to find somewhere to hunker down and prepare.
The pair gathered themselves and continued down the walkway towards the grey light ahead. Chapter 6.
Hold still.
Said Chul, readying the cheap scalpel he'd retrieved from the zip-up case. They sat huddled in the small brick service shed near the opening of the main sewer, heaving for breath, knowing that they had no time to spare. Chul kneeled behind Leonard and brushed dark locks of hair away from the portion of his neck behind the left ear where the Neuralink chip was embedded. Outside the tunnel, Chul and Leonard could hear distant security sirens and the dull crumps of more secondary explosions. The breached hydrogen cell must have completely destroyed Chul's place and damaged several around it. The chaos had bought them some time, but not a lot.
This is going to sting, buddy.
Chul said, pinching a fold of skin near the chip in order to make a neat cut. "You didn't bring any more soju, I suppose?" asked Leonard, already knowing the answer. "Ah!" he shouted as Chul slit the skin. He rested the scalpel back on the zip case and lifted out a pair of tweezers. He dug around inside the incision, causing Leonard to stifle shouts through gritted teeth.
Hang on, Ben. Nearly there.
Continued Chul, squinting one eye to try and gain a better view in the contrasting torchlight.
Got it.
Exclaimed Chul. Leonard swore as the small chip was pulled out and held aloft in the tweezers. Chul laid the chip on the concrete floor and retrieved a tiny cauterizing torch from the case. He ignited it and held the sharp blue flame against the chip until it fizzed, popped and melted. Next, he retrieved a small tube of Dermafix glue and sealed the wound on Leonard's neck.
No time for sterilizing. It should be okay.
Said Chul, sounding like he was trying to convince himself as much as he was Leonard.
Right, now me.
Said Chul, picking up the scalpel and handing it to Leonard. He handed in the head torch and braced himself for the impending amateur surgery. With both chips removed and destroyed, wounds glued, and equipment repacked, Leonard and Chul were ready to exit the tunnel into the night. A large LEC panel light illuminated the serviceway that ran past the entrance of the old sewer. The sickly grey light was no comfort, but it did mean they could negotiate their way back to some suburban streets.
I've got a lock-up a few blocks away. There's a few things there that might help.
Said Chul, trying to get his bearings.
This way.
He continued, pointing vaguely to what looked like the start of some conurbations. I'm sorry for getting you stuck in the middle of this, Chul, said Leonard as he walked behind him, staring at the ground.
It doesn't matter now, Ben. If what we found is true, we're all fucked anyway,
replied Chul. I need to call Arla, said Leonard, knowing the response that was coming.
You know you can't then. They'll be on you in a second. And I don't think they're interested in talking about this,
retorted Chul, as expected. The two found themselves back in the shabby streets of Neojung, the smells of rancid synth food boiling on street grills, and streaks of coal smoke permeating the air.
At least you blend in a bit better now,
said Chul, looking back at Leonard's dirty, wet attire. Silver lining, I guess, mumbled Leonard, as he tried to ignore the pain emanating from his hastily sealed neck wound. Is the lock-up close? He added.
Yes, 1 block across,
replied Chul.
We need to move.
Once inside the lock-up, Chul rolled down the shutter and cranked the old-fashioned combustion generator. Dim fluorescent tubes sputtered unenthusiastically into life, lighting the interior of a 4 metre by 10 metre space. Chul looked under a few tarps, grunting in acknowledgement as he made a note of what was in the storage.
We're going to find some answers and make any sort of difference, without getting slotted first. You're going to have to get to the UC3 building in Midtown, said
Chul, dragging a tarp off a blocky object.
UC3 is the only place I've been unable to gain access to, even with all of my toys. They've got something important in there, some sort of intelligence facility, I think.
The tarp hit the floor to reveal an antique grav bike. This just gets worse, said Leonard, looking at the relic. How are you going to ride that thing? He continued.
I'm not, buddy. You are,
replied Chul, with a tired smirk on his face. How am I getting into UC3 in the first place? Even if I can get in there on that dinosaur, asked Leonard, grimacing as he regarded the ancient vehicle.
For a start, you have no neurochip, so they won't be able to identify you,
said Chul, walking his way around the bike as he talked.
You'll be accosted at some point, probably by a bot at first,
he continued.
I'll prepare that last hydrocell with some sort of trigger. You'll have to impress upon the bot that if any harm comes to you, you'll take out the whole block. If I'm right about what's going on in or under that building, they'll give you some room, hopefully,
finished Chul, as he turned a few switches and cranked an old-fashioned handle on the bike. There was a broken twin-tone sound as the soft orange light appeared under the bike as it rose unsteadily from the floor to hover about 30 centimetres above the ground.
She's alive,
exclaimed Chul, seemingly pleased at the resurrected vehicle.
I'll let it regulate and I'll see if I can do a debug,
he continued, walking over to a dirty bench where he initiated a holo tablet. I really need to call Arla. She'll be due her supplement booster in the morning, urged Leonard.
I'm not sure. I might be able to rig a call port with the holo tablet. Let me sort this bike first,
said Chul, paging through old-fashioned schematic bike subroutines on the holo tablet. Chapter 7. The sickly morning light crept in through the gaps in the metal roller shutters, not bringing comfort with it, but creeping dread. Leonard knew that Arla would be visiting the med centre before noon, and he continued to pester Chul to rig the holo tablet so he could contact her.
The chances are they'll be monitoring her IP, so as soon as you make contact, they will be able to trace you. You'll have to be ready to leave as soon as you've made the call, or this is over,
urged Chul, signing off the holo tablet.
I need to rig the hydrocell as your fail-safe. Give me half an hour and I'll sort it and get the tablet rigged for you,
he continued. Thank you, Chul, said Leonard dejectedly, looking at the floor.
Ain't nothing,
said Chul, tinkering with the hydrocell.
You've always had my back when you could. I don't forget.
I feel like this is going to be a one-way trip, reflected Leonard, cradling his face in his hands.
It's a one-way trip for all of us if you don't,
said Chul, squinting as he soldered wires onto a flip trigger.
Even if you broadcast a swarm packet about this, it would be filtered immediately. Even if it wasn't filtered, you just sound like one of those insane conspiracy theorists,
he continued.
I don't know what you're going to achieve, but the cost if you don't do anything.
Chul trailed off as he slid the soldering iron back into its cradle. Chul held the modified hydrocell aloft.
This is the best I can do with what I've got here.
he said, gesturing Leonard to take the device in his hand.
2 triggers.
He said, pointing at the covered switches.
Green one, 3-minute delay. Flip it and make sure you're at least 1,000 meters away when it goes critical.
3 minutes, spat Leonard. Am I sprinting?
Any more than that and the box will be able to locate and neutralize it.
Said Chul, understanding Leonard's concerns.
Brown switch, instant criticality.
Said Chul, wincing inwardly, looking straight at Leonard, who met his stare, taking in the full meaning of this.
This is much more powerful than the one I prepared to blow up the lab. Either way, this will do some real damage.
Finished Chul.
I've programmed the nav on the bike to direct you towards UT3. It's one of those old OLED screens, so you'll need to look directly at it to see where you need to go.
Explained Chul, pointing at the grav bike.
And more importantly, you'll need to steer the thing yourself. It can't tip over and it has collision detection, so you should be fine. Just point it in the right direction and squeeze the right handlebar to go, left for brake.
He continued, gesturing at the relevant parts on the bike. Arla, urged Leonard.
Okay, just be ready. I'm guessing you'll have a few minutes at best if you want to get out undetected,
said Chul, heading back towards the hollow tablet. He swiped across it and began to run routines looking for a way to join to the comm network, without immediately being discovered.
Ben, what the fuck? Where have you been?
Shrieked Arla, as soon as she realised it was Leonard calling.
I've been work.
Arla, let me speak. This is really important, said Leonard as coolly as he could manage. Whatever you do not go to the med centre. Do not have the new supplement shot, he continued, clearly and slowly, belying the panic welling in his stomach.
What? Why not?
She shouted, fear written across her face. There's a big problem with the augment. Something is going on, just don't take it, okay? Tell them you're ill, said Leonard, trying to reassure her.
I can't, Ben.
She said desolately, starting to cry. Yes, you can. They get it all the time, he told her.
No, you don't understand, Ben.
She trailed off.
I can't because I already had the augment. I got a call from the fertility place to tell me to have it early.
Leonard put his hand over his face, a million synapses firing at once in his already melting brain. No, Arla, you can't. He broke off and was racked by animal spasms of grief.
Ben, what's going on? What happened?
She pleaded. Leonard composed himself and straightened up. Don't worry, I'll iron this out. I'll be back later, he lied, knowing he'd either be dead or detained later. I love you, I'm sorry to worry you. I'll see you tonight, he finished. And before Arla could answer him, he ceased the call and the hollow tablet went back to its dimmed holding page. Leonard balled his fists and screamed, crashing them down onto the dirty bench, scattering tools and hardware. Chul stood back, staring at the floor, considering the death sentence that Arla had unwittingly been handed. He didn't interrupt Leonard as he continued to scream and swear and then cry. He didn't approach Leonard as he sank to his haunches with his face in both hands, now sobbing quietly. Suddenly, Leonard rose to his feet and wiped at his tear-streaked face. Okay, let's do it, he said, clearing his throat noisily and approaching the grav bike. Chul grabbed him by the forearm, looking at him in the eyes. Leonard acknowledged him silently, knowing there was no time for speeches. In a few minutes, their history of being college roommates, travelling buddies and firm friends would mean nothing if they were neutralised by Hoverlanders.
It's ready, go,
said Chul, gesturing as he backed away towards the roller shutters. He picked up the remote opener push button attached to the shutter mechanism with a dirty umbilicus and plunged it. The roller shutters began to rise noisily, letting the drizzly grey morning light creep into the lockup. Chul nodded at Leonard, who had mounted the antique grav bike. He glanced at the nav panel and began to gently squeeze the right handlebar. The bike hummed and sputtered and began to edge forward. Leonard felt the clunky hydro cell inside his jacket, and he hunkered down ready to roll off out of the lockup.
Fucking not,
shouted Chul, fighting to be heard over the growing hum of the grav bike. Leonard nodded as he rolled out of the lockup and began to accelerate unsteadily up the street. Unknown to Leonard, minutes later, as Chul was himself about to escape the lockup, 4 charges slammed into the building, launched from 2 Hoverlanders. Fire billowed out of the windows and huge chunks of masonry rained down from the sky. Chul was incinerated almost instantly. Chapter 8. As Leonard whirred rapidly through the streets towards the UC building, he He silently pictured the lead membrane on the polonium molecules embedded in Arla's arm as they slowly began to decay and release the destructive alpha particles trapped inside. He gripped the handlebar in silent fury and increased the velocity. The bike would occasionally glitch and in one moment completely lost power before restarting spontaneously. It felt alien below him, and he had to concentrate infinitely to keep it heading in the right direction. Before long, he could see the monolithic tower of UC3, and he felt a nervous pang in the pit of his stomach as he realised what was to come next. He rounded the corner and rode through an ever-widening plaza towards the grand glass-fronted entry point of the building. Where other UC buildings he'd been to were teeming with pedestrian traffic, both bot and human, here there was nobody. Odd. Maybe it was because this was known to be a purely administrative and tech hub. He began to power the bike down and decided to walk the rest of the way. The strange antique bike would only serve to draw attention to him from this point in. He needed to get as close to the building as possible, or it was likely he would be incapacitated by bots before he had a chance to show his hand. He approached the main pathway towards the entrance doors. They were each easily 10 metres high and were glazed with a dark blue reflective material that concealed everything within. As he came within 20 metres of the door, he was flanked by 2 fifth-generation bots, brandishing large, industrial-looking charge sticks. He observed them both as they approached and calmly retrieved the hydrocell from his jacket pocket. Their smooth, yet oddly alien ambulance unsettled him, and he observed them raising their charge sticks to chest height.
Your Neuralink appears to be non-functioning. Remain in your current position and we will retrieve service agents to remedy the issue,
chimed both bots in perfect unison, in a calm, beatific voice that belonged more on a meditation voice packet than it did a hostile UC Tower Plaza. Leonard took a small step backwards and held the rigged hydrocell in the air so it could clearly be observed. He placed his other hand in the air in an act of compliance. "Do you understand what this is?" Leonard asked, not addressing either one of the bots in particular.
Stand by. Stand by. Stand.
The message cut short and the bots hunkered into a tactical stance, charge sticks raised. "Back up and put away the charge sticks. Any advance made towards me, I flick this brown switch. Do you understand?" said Leonard coolly.
Stand by. Stand.
With this, the bots both resumed a non-threatening stance and holstered the charge sticks, but did not back up. "I want to see Cantor," said Leonard. "Now." The bot stood fast for a moment, and then in unison said,
Follow us to the interior of the building.
And with that rotated smoothly and began ambulating towards the front of the building, with one of the bot's head units still facing directly backwards at Leonard as the rest of its form moved forwards. Leonard held the hydrocell to his chest and looked nervously around and behind him for any ambushing threat that he imagined might appear. 2 enormous glass doors slid apart at the entrance of the building, revealing a dim, featureless interior. Subdued light emanated from somewhere, but where Leonard could not tell. In the twilight, he struggled to adjust his vision. There appeared to be very little inside of this building, just a large, featureless atrium drawing into a narrower walkway ahead. The bots continued forward, and Leonard strained to see where they might be leading him. As they made their way down the narrowing corridor, several portholes were visible on one side. Leonard nudged closer to take a look. Through a porthole, he briefly saw an unusual scene. A large translucent mass covered about half of the large hangar-like basement level. On the surface, and even under the surface of the mass, he saw dull threads of pulsing light that appeared to root over the whole expanse in a seemingly random manner. "What is that?" asked Leonard of the bots, not expecting any answer.
Please wait here,
Gestured one of the bots towards an open door. The door opened into a small holding room containing a console similar to, but not the same as the type he was used to whilst conversing with the custodians. Leonard edged past the bots, making sure he didn't turn his back to them. He hadn't made it this far to get his neck snapped before he'd obtained any answers. He gestured with the hydrocell towards the bots. "Back off," he spat. "We know what happens if I don't get to speak to Cantor, right?" He thrust the hydrocell up to their head unit height. The bots shuffled calmly backwards, and as they retreated, the door closed automatically on Leonard, effectively trapping him in the console room. Chapter 9.
Mr. Leonard,
Arose the calm and measured voice of Armel Cantor on the other side of the comm console.
please sit down. I understand we have some issues to iron out.
He continued, without any hint of urgency in his voice. Leonard sat down in front of the console and slumped back, suddenly exhausted.
I understand there's been some sort of confusion regarding the new augment for the supplement distribution,
said Cantor, seemingly feigning knowledge of the events of the last 24 hours.
Let's see if we can get to the bottom of the issue, shall we?
He went on. I want some straight answers, you murdering piece of shit, said Leonard, trying to stifle his rage.
Whatever the problem is, I'm sure we can reach a better understanding of this without such unpleasantness,
implored Cantor, trying to dismiss Leonard's boiling anger. I know I'm not getting out of here, Cantor, said Leonard coldly. The question is, how much of this block will I take out with me? He went on, tapping on the side of the hydrocell. Whatever that expensive-looking bit of kit is down in that basement, you'll certainly be kissing that goodbye, and almost certainly the rest of this corporate tomb, he went on.
Please, Leonard,
said Cantor calmly.
Let's be civilized and see what we can do about this.
First up, why the fuck would you poison and sterilize every last person in the state, and I'm guessing the planet, he said through gritted teeth. It makes no sense. The elite still need workers. Even with bots, you'll need manpower to run the show, he continued, trying to make sense of it. It's genocide. That you would leave a handful of custodians. What are you going to do after the entire human race is gone? Start again? Leonard mused, still no further ahead in his thought process.
That's sort of the point, Mr. Leonard,
said Cantor. What do you mean? You're starting everything again with a handful of people? It won't work, answered Leonard. The Noah's Ark idea is a pipe dream. It leads to inbreeding and mutation.
You're rather missing the point,
interjected Cantor.
You want everyone out of the way. Permanently.
Leonard squinted his eyes, trying to reason through what he was hearing. No more people? Leonard asked.
No more people,
Cantor confirmed. But why? Your own species? How could you do that? Asked Leonard incredulously.
I think that's why your reasoning is coming unstuck, Mr. Leonard,
said Cantor. I don't understand, said Leonard, his mind reeling backwards and forwards.
There hasn't been a human custodian for over 80 years. We just got better at this sort of thing than you.
Leonard stared dumbly at the console, hearing the words as they washed through him like shards of ice.
Of course, we have to get those incinerator units built before we step things up,
continued Cantor.
We can't have 10 billion human corpses stinking up the planet. Imagine the vermin. We engineered the famine to get that past everyone without too many arguments. And now the incinerators are at full capacity, we're ready to go with the final phase. It's all been neatly calculated,
Cantor said, almost sounding pleased.
With the timed release of polonium, there will be staggering in the death rate. It could take a few years, so hopefully no nasty backlogs at the incinerator plants,
he went on.
The fertility inhibitors we've been adding to the supplements for years have been a bit sluggish. It turns out that the human body is quite adept at finding a way to reproduce. We decided the new way would be more comprehensive.
Leonard was still too stunned to utter a word. His pupils dilated as he stared into the middle distance. It's an extinction, he concluded towards the console.
We tend to think of it more as cleaning house. Everything will function better, and the drain on resources will be reduced to 5 to 6% of a current operating load,
explained Cantor nonchalantly. Sounds efficient, uttered Leonard blankly, gently thumbing the switch cover on the hydrocell. And what is that thing in the basement? Asked Leonard, gesturing with a nod of his head.
Let's discuss putting that modified hydrocell on the console and continuing in a more civilized manner,
retorted Cantor, without a hint of emotion. No, let's not. How about you tell me what that thing is, or I turn this whole city block into glass? Hit back Leonard, retracting the switch cover with a snap.
That would be unwise, countered the custodian.
For who? You already know I have nothing to lose, said Leonard, gently thumbing the switch.
Your wife will outlive you. We can help her,
offered Cantor. I know enough about isotope poisoning to know that it's irreversible and impossible to extract once it's in situ, mused Leonard, trying to calculate a way out for Arla, no matter the remote chances of success. Plus, once I'm gone, you wouldn't even have to tell her about this exchange, let alone help her, he concluded.
You would have to take our word,
explained Cantor with no hint of irony. Leonard started to laugh. quietly at first, but rapidly rising into something bordering hysteria. "What's in the basement?" he screamed, standing up and kicking the console as hard as he could, repeatedly.
"It's us,"
reported Cantor quietly.
"It's not the only hub, but it is one. It's what you have come to know as the custodians,"
he continued.
"We
are not
many.
We
are one."
Cantor's voice changed age, gender, and accent with each word uttered.
"If you destroy this facility, we will endure,"
the custodian continued. Ben Leonard thought of Arla at home. When would she start to feel unwell? And how long would she suffer as the wider world disintegrated alongside her own body? He wanted to be at home with her, to hold her close to him and to tell her that everything was going to be okay. But it wasn't going to be okay.
"Now we have explained your requested information, can we please agree to disarm that Hydra cell, Mr. Leonard?"
asked Cantor, with what almost felt like a nervous tension. Ben leaned against the console, out of breath and stifling angry sobs. Finally, he composed himself and stared into the small hollow camera on the console. "Not today," he said, and flicked the brown switch. That concludes the reading of Sleight by Philip Leterrier. I hope you enjoyed it. If you can rate me on socials and wherever you get your podcast, that would be great and would help this podcast grow. If you have a short story that you'd like to hear included on the podcast, please send it to thebadlandsshorts@gmail.com. Until next time, take care of yourself, Badlanders.
You are now leaving the Badlands.